question that remained was when.
Anaya gave her a considering look. That tall boy from your village? Missing him already, are you? Well, I shouldn't be surprised if he is in trouble. Young men his age usually are. Though it was the other one, Matt, who had the look of trouble. Very well, child. I don't mean to mock you or make light. What kind of trouble, and how do you know? He and Lord Ingtar must have the horn and be back in Faldara by now. Or else they've had to follow it into the Blight, and there's nothing to do about that. I don't think they're in the Blight or back in Faldara. I had a dream. She said it half defiantly. It sounded silly when she said it, but it had seemed so real. A nightmare for true, but real. First there had been a man with a mask over his face and fire in place of his eyes. Despite the mask, she had thought he was surprised to see her. His look had frightened her till she thought her bones would break from shivering, but suddenly he vanished, and she saw Rand sleeping on the ground, wrapped in a cloak. A woman had been standing over him, looking down. Her face was in shadow, but her eyes seemed to shine like the moon, and Egwene had known she was evil. Then there was a flash of light, and they were gone, both of them. And behind it all, almost like another thing altogether, was the feel of danger, as if a trap shut on an unsuspecting lamb, a trap with many jaws. As though time had slowed, and she could watch the iron jaws creep closer together. The dream had not faded with waking the way dreams did, and the danger felt so strong she still wanted to look over her shoulder, only somehow she knew that it was aimed at Rand, not at her. She wondered if the woman had been Moiraine, and upbraided herself for the thought. Liandrin fit that part better, or perhaps Alanna. She had been interested in Rand, too. She could not bring herself to tell Anaya. Formally, she said, "Anaya Sedai, I know it sounds foolish, but he is in danger. Great danger. I know it. I could feel it. I still can." Anaya wore a thoughtful look. "Well now," she said softly, "that's a possibility I'll wager no one has considered. You may be a dreamer. It is a small chance, child, but we haven't had one of those in, 400 or 500 years. And dreaming is close linked to foretelling. If you really can dream, it may be that you can foretell as well. That would be a finger in the red's eye. Of course, it could be just an ordinary nightmare, brought on by a late night and cold food and us traveling so hard since we left Faldara. And you missing your young man. Much more likely. Yes, child, I know. You are worried about him. Did your dream indicate what kind of danger?" Egwene shook her head. "He just vanished, and I felt danger and evil. I felt it even before he vanished." She shivered and rubbed her hands together. "I can still feel it." "Well, we will talk about it more on the River Queen. If you are a dreamer, I will see you have the training Moiraine should be here to—" "You there!" the Aes Sedai barked suddenly, and Egwene jumped. A tall man who had just sat down on a cask of wine jumped too. Several others quickened their step. "That's for loading aboard, not resting on." "We will talk on the boat, child." "No, you fool, you can't carry it by yourself. Do you want to hurt yourself?" Anaya went striding off down the dock, giving the unfortunate villagers a rougher side of her tongue than Egwene would have suspected she had. Egwene peered into the dark, toward the south. He was out there, somewhere. Not in Faldara. Not in the Blight. She was sure of it. "Hold on, you wool-headed idiot. If you get yourself killed before I can get you out of this, I will skin you alive." It did not occur to her to ask how she was going to get him out of anything, going to Tar Valon as she was. Snugging her cloak around her, she set out to find a boat to the River Queen.
Chapter 13. From Stone to Stone. The light of the rising sun woke Rand, and he wondered if he were dreaming. He sat up slowly, staring. Everything had changed, or almost everything. The sun and the sky were as he expected to see, if pallid and all but cloudless. Loyal and Huron still lay on either side of him, wrapped in their cloaks asleep, and their horses still stood hobbled a pace away. But everyone else was gone. Soldiers, horses, his friends, everyone and everything gone. The hollow itself had changed too, and they were in the middle of it now, no longer on the edge. At Rand's head rose a gray stone cylinder, every bit of 3 spans high and a full pace thick, covered with hundreds, perhaps thousands of deeply incised diagrams and markings in some language he did not recognize. White stone paved the bottom of the hollow, as level as a floor, polished so smooth it almost glistened. Broad, high steps rose to the rim in concentric rings of different colored stone. And about the rim, the trees stood blackened and twisted, as if a firestorm had roared through them. Everything seemed paler than it should be, just like the sun, more subdued, as if seen through mist. Only there was no mist. Just the 3 of them and the horses appeared truly solid. But when he touched the stone under him, it felt solid enough. He reached out and shook Loyal and Huron. "Wake up! Wake up and tell me I'm dreaming. Please wake up!"
"Is it morning already?"
Loyal began, sitting up. Then his mouth fell open, and his big round eyes grew wider and wider. Huron woke with a start, then leaped to his feet, jumping like a flea in a hot rock to look this way, then that.
"Where are we? What's happened? Where is everybody? Where are we, Lord Rand?"
He sank to his knees, wringing his hands, but his eyes still darted.
"What's happened?"
"I don't know," Rand said slowly. "I was hoping it was a dream, but maybe it is a dream." He had had experience of dreams that were not dreams, experience he wanted neither to repeat nor to remember. He stood up carefully. Everything stayed as it was.
"I do not think so,"
Loyal said. He was studying the column, and he did not appear happy. His long eyebrows sagged across his cheeks, and his tufted ears seemed to have wilted.
"I think this is the same stone we went to sleep beside last night. I think I know what it is now."
For once he sounded miserable about knowing. No. That being the same stone was no more crazy than what he could see around him. Matt and Perrin and the Shinarans gone, and everything changed. "I thought I'd escaped, but it started again. And there's no such thing as crazy anymore. Unless I am." He looked at Loyal and Huron. They were not acting as if he were mad. They saw it too. Something about the steps caught his eye. The different colors. 7 rising from blue to red. "One for each Ajah," he said. "No, Lord Rand," Huron moaned. "No. Aes Sedai would not do this to us. They wouldn't. I walk in the light." "We all do, Huron," Rand said. "The Aes Sedai won't hurt you. Unless you get in the way. Could this be Moraine's doing somehow?" "Loyal, you said you know what the stone is. What is it?"
"I said I think I know, Rand. There was a piece of an old book, just a few pages. But one of them had a drawing of this stone. This stone."
There was a distinct difference in the way he said it that marked importance.
"Or one very like it. And underneath it, it said, 'From stone to stone run the lines of If, between the worlds that might be.'"
"What does that mean, Loyal? It doesn't make any sense." The Ogier shook his massive head sadly.
"It was only a few pages. Part of it said Aes Sedai in the Age of Legends, some of those who could travel, the most powerful of them, could use these stones. It did not say how, but I think, from what I could puzzle out, that perhaps those Aes Sedai used the stones somehow to journey to those worlds."
He glanced up at the seared trees and pulled his eyes down again quickly, as he did not want to think about what lay beyond the rim.
"Yet even if Aes Sedai can use them, or could, we have no Aes Sedai with us to channel the power. So I don't see how it can be."
Rand's skin prickled. Aes Sedai used them, in the Age of Legends, when there were male Aes Sedai. He had a vague memory of the void closing round him as he fell asleep, filled with that uneasy glow. And he remembered the room in the village, and the light he had reached for to escape. If that was the male half of True Source. No, it can't be. But what if it is? Light. I was wondering whether to run or not, and all the time it's right inside my head. Maybe I brought us here. He did not want to think about it. Worlds that might be. I don't understand, Loial. The Ogier shrugged massively and uneasily.
Neither do I, Rand. Most of it sounded like this. If a woman go left or right, does time's flow divide? Does the wheel then weave two patterns? 1,000 for each of her turnings? As many as the stars? Is one real, the others merely shadows and reflections? You see, it is not very clear. Mainly questions, most of which seem to contradict each other. And there just wasn't much of it.
He went back to staring at the column, but he looked as if he wished it would go away.
There are supposed to be a good many of these stones scattered all over the world, or there were once. But I never heard of anyone finding one. I never heard of anyone finding anything like this at all.
My Lord Rand. Now on his feet, Hurin seemed calmer, but he clutched his coat at the waist with both hands, his face urgent. My Lord Rand, you'll get us back, won't you? Back where we belong? I've a wife, my lord, and children. Melia'd take it bad enough, me dying, but if she doesn't even have my body to give to the mother's embrace, she'll grieve to the end of her days. You understand, my lord? I can't leave her not knowing. You'll get us back. And if I die, if you can't take her my body, you'll let her know, so she has that at least. He was no longer questioning at the end. A note of confidence had crept into his voice. Rand opened his mouth to say again he was not a lord, then shut it without speaking. That was hardly important enough to mention now. You got him into this. He wanted to deny it, but he knew what he was, knew he could channel, even if it always seemed to happen all by itself. Loial said Aes Sedai used the stones, and that meant the one power. What Loial said he knew, you could be sure of. The Ogier never claimed to know if he did not. And there was no one else nearby who could wield the power. You got him into it. You have to get him out. You have to try. I will do my best, Hurin. And because Hurin was Shienaran, he added, by my house and honor. A shepherd's house and a shepherd's honor, but I'll make them do as well as a lord's. Hurin loosed his hold on his coat. The confidence reached his eyes, too. He bowed deeply. Honor to serve, my lord. Guilt rippled through Rand. He thinks you'll see him home now because Shienaran lords always keep their word. What are you going to do, Lord Rand? None of that, Hurin. There'll be no bowing. I'm not... Suddenly he knew he could not tell the man again that he was not a lord. All that was holding the cipher together was his belief in a lord, and he could not take that away. Not now. Not here. No bowing, he finished awkwardly. As you say, Lord Rand. Hurin's grin was almost as wide as when Rand first met him. Rand cleared his throat. Yes, well, that's what I say. They were both watching him, Loial curious, Hurin confident, both waiting to see what he would do. I brought them here. I must have. So I have to get them back. And that means... Drawing a deep breath, he walked across the white paving stones to the symbol-covered cylinder. Small lines of some language he did not know surrounded each symbol. Odd letters that flowed in curves and spirals, suddenly turned to jagged hooks and angles, then flowed on. At least it was not Trolloc script. Reluctantly, he put his hands on the column. It looked like any dry, polished stone, but it felt curiously slick, like oiled metal. He closed his eyes and formed the flame. The void came slowly, hesitantly. He knew his own fear was holding it back, fear of what he was trying. As fast as he fed fear into the flame, more came. I can't do it. Channel the power. I don't want to. Like there has to be another way. Grimly, he forced the thoughts to stillness. He could feel sweat beading on his face. Determinedly, he kept on, pushing his fears into the consuming flame, making it grow and grow. And the void was there. The core of him floated in emptiness. He could see the light. Saidin. Even with his eyes closed. Feel the warmth of it surrounding him, surrounding everything. Suffusing everything. It wavered like a candle flame seen through oiled paper. Rancid oil, stinking oil. He reached for it. He was not sure how he reached, but it was something, a movement, a stretching toward the light, towards Saidin, and caught nothing as if running his hands through water. It felt like a slimy pond, scum floating atop clean water below. He could not scoop up any of the water. Time and again it trickled through his fingers, not even droplets of the water remaining, only the slick scum, making his skin crawl. Desperately he tried to form an image of the hollow as it had been, with Ingtar and the Lances sleeping by their horses, with Matt and Perrin, and the stone lying buried except for one end. Outside the void he formed it, clinging to the shell of emptiness that enclosed him. He tried to link the image with the light, tried to force them together. The hollow as it had been, and he and Loial and Hurin there together. His head hurt. Together with Matt and Perrin and the Shienarans. Burning in his head. Together. The void shattered into 1,000 razor shards, slicing his mind. Shuddering, he staggered back, wide-eyed. His hands hurt from pressing the stone, and his arms and shoulders quivered with aching. His stomach lurched from the feel of filth covering him, and his head... He tried to steady his breathing. That had never happened before. When the void went, it went like a pricked bubble, just gone, in a twinkling. Never like broken glass. His head felt numb, as if 1,000 slashes had happened so quickly that pain had not yet come. But every cut had felt as real as if done with a knife. He touched his temple and was surprised not to see blood on his fingers. Hurin stood there watching him, still confident. If anything, the sniffer seemed more sure by the minute. Lord Rand was doing something. That was what lords were for. They protected the land and the people with their bodies and their lives, and when something was wrong, they set it right, and saw fairness and justice done. As long as Rand was doing something, anything, Hurin would have confidence that it would all come out right in the end. That was what lords did. Loial had a different look, a slightly puzzled frown, but his eyes were on Rand too. Rand wondered what he was thinking. It was worth a try, he told them. The rancid oil feel inside his head. Light, it's inside me. I don't want it inside me. Was fading slowly, but he still thought he might vomit. I will try again in a few minutes. He hoped he sounded confident. He had no idea how the stones worked, if what he was doing had any chance of success. Maybe there are rules for working them. Maybe you have to do something special. Like maybe you can't use the same stone twice, or... He cut off that line of thought. There was no good in thinking like that. He had to do it. Looking at Loial and Hurin, he thought he knew what Lan had meant about duty pressing down like a mountain. My lord, I think... Hurin let his words trail off, looking abashed for a moment. My lord, maybe if we find the Dark Friends, we can make one of them tell us how to get back. I would ask a Dark Friend or the Dark One himself if I thought I'd get a true answer back, Rand said. But we are all there is, just us three. Just me. I'm the one who has to do it. We could follow their trail, my lord. If we catch them... Rand stared at the sniffer. You can still smell them? I can, my lord. Hurin frowned. It's faint, pale-like everything else here. But I can smell the trail. Right up there. He pointed to the rim of the hollow. I don't understand it, my lord, but... Last night I could have sworn the trail went right on by the hollow, back where we were. Well, it's in the same place now, only here, and fainter, like I said. Not old, not faint like that, but... I don't know, Lord Rand. except that it's there. Rand considered. If Vane and the Dark Friends were here, wherever here was, they might know how to get back. They had to if they had reached here in the first place. And they had the horn and the dagger. Matt had to have that dagger. For that, if for nothing else, he had to find them. What finally decided him, he was ashamed to realize, was that he was afraid to try again. Afraid to try channeling the power. He was less afraid of confronting Dark Friends and Trollocs with only Huron and Loyal than he was of that. Then we will go after the Dark Friends. He tried to sound sure, the way Lan would, or Ingtar. The horn must be recovered. If we can't puzzle out a way to take it from them, at least we will know where they are when we find Ingtar again. If only they don't ask how we're going to find him again. Huron, make sure it really is the trail we're after. The sniffer leaped into his saddle, eager to be doing something himself, perhaps eager to be away from the hollow, and scrambled his horse up the broad-colored steps. The animal's hooves rang loudly on the stone, but they made not a mark. Rand stowed Red's hobbles in his saddlebags.
Wait 1 second,
The
everyone.
banner was still there. He would not have minded if that
We
had
got to
been
clean
left
his
behind.
limbs up a little
Then
bit.
gathered his bow and quiver and climbed to the stallion's back. The bundle of Tom Maryland's cloak made a
See,
mound
that
behind
helps.
his saddle. Loyal led his big mount over to him. With the Ogier standing on the ground, Loyal's head came almost to Rand's shoulder, and him in his saddle. Loyal still looked puzzled. You think we should stay here? Rand said. Try again to use the stone. If the Dark Friends are here in place, we have to find them. We can't leave the Horn of Val'ir in Dark Friend hands. You heard the Amerlin, and we have to get that dagger back. Matt will die without it. Loyal nodded.
Yes, Rand, we do. But Rand, the stones.
We will find another. You said they were scattered all over, and if they're all like this, all this stonework around them, it should not be too hard to find one.
Rand, that fragment said the stones came from an older age than the Age of Legends. And even the Aes Sedai then did not understand them, though they used them. Some of the truly powerful did. They used them with the one power, Rand. How do you think to use this stone to take us back? Or any other stone we find?
For a moment, Rand could only stare at the Ogier, thinking faster than he ever had in his life. If they are older than the Age of Legends, maybe the people who built them didn't use the power. There must be another way. The Dark Friends got here, and they certainly couldn't use the power. Whatever this other way is, I will find it out. I will get us back, Loyal. He looked at the tall stone column with its odd markings and felt a prickle of fear. Light, if only I don't have to use the power to do it. I will, Loyal. I promise. One way or another. The Ogier gave a doubtful nod. He swung up onto his huge horse and followed Rand up the steps to join Huron among the blackened trees. The land stretched out, low and rolling, sparsely forested here and there with grassland between, crossed by more than one stream. In the middle distance, Rand thought he could see another burned patch. It was all pale, the colors washed. There was no sign of anything made by men except the stone circle behind them. The sky was empty, no chimney smoke, no birds, only a few clouds and the pale yellow sun. Worst of all, though, the land seemed to twist the eye. What was close at hand looked all right, and what was seen straight ahead in the distance. But whenever Rand turned his head, things that appeared distant when seen from the corner of his eye seemed to rush toward him, to be nearer when he stared straight at them. It made for dizziness. Even the horses whickered nervously and rolled their eyes. He tried moving his head slowly. The apparent movement of things that should have been fixed was still there, but it seemed to help a little. Did your piece of a book say anything about this? Rand asked. Loyal shook his head, then swallowed hard as if he wished he had kept it still.
Nothing.
I suppose there's nothing to do for it. Which way, Huron? South, Lord Rand. The sniffer kept his eyes on the ground. South, then. There has to be a way back besides using the power. Rand heeled Red's flanks. He tried to make his voice light-hearted, as if he saw no difficulty at all in what they were about. What was it Ingtar said? 3 or 4 days to that monument to Arthur Hawkwing. I wonder if that exists here too, the way the stones do. If this is a world that could be, maybe it's still standing. Wouldn't that be something to see, Loyal? They rode south. Chapter 14. Wolf Brother. Gone, Ingtar demanded of the air. And my guards saw nothing. Nothing. They cannot just be gone. Listening, Perrin hunched his shoulders and looked at Matt, off frowning and muttering to himself. Arguing with himself was how Perrin saw it. The sun was peeking over the horizon, past time for them to have been riding. Shadows lay long across the hollow, stretched out and thinned, but still like the trees that made them. The pack horses, loaded and on their lead line, stamped impatiently, but everyone stood by his mount and waited. Uno came striding up. Not a goat-kissing track, my lord. He sounded offended. Failure touched on his skill. Burn me, not so much as a flaming hoof scrape. They just bloody vanished. 3 men and 3 horses do not just vanish, Ingtar growled. Go over the ground again, Uno. If anyone can find where they went, it's you. Maybe they just ran away, Matt said. Uno stopped and glared at him. Like he'd cursed an Aes Sedai, Perrin thought wonderingly. Why would they run away? Ingtar's voice was dangerously soft. Rand, the builder, my sniffer. My sniffer! Why would any of them run, much less all 3? Matt shrugged. I don't know. Rand was... Perrin wanted to throw something at him, hit him, anything to stop him, but Ingtar and Uno were watching. He felt a flood of relief when Matt hesitated, then spread his hands and muttered, I don't know why. I just thought maybe they had. Ingtar grimaced. Ran away. He growled as if he did not believe it for an instant. The builder can go as he will, but Huron would not run away, and neither would Rand al'Thor. He would not. He knows his duty now. Go on, Uno. Search the ground again. Uno gave a half bow and hurried away, sword hilt bobbing over his shoulder. Ingtar grumbled. Why would Huron leave like that, in the middle of the night without a word? He knows what we're about. How am I to track this shadow-spawned filth without him? I would give 1,000 gold crowns for a pack of trailhounds. If I did not know better, I would say the Dark Friends manage this so they can slip east or west without me knowing. Peace, I don't know if I do know better. He stumped off after Uno. Perrin shifted uneasily. The Dark Friends were doubtless getting further away with every minute. Getting further away, and with them the Horn of Val'ir, and the dagger from Shadar Logoth. He did not think that Rand, whatever he had become, whatever had happened to him, would abandon that chase. But where did he go? And why? Loyal might go with Rand for friendship, but why Huron? Maybe he did run away, he muttered, then looked around. No one appeared to have heard. Even Matt was not paying him any mind. He scrubbed a hand through his hair. If Aes Sedai had been after him to be a false dragon, he would have run too. But worrying about Rand was doing nothing to help track the Dark Friends. There was a way, perhaps, if he was willing to take it. He did not want to take it. He had been running away from it. But perhaps now he could no longer run. Serves me right for what I told Rand. I wish I could run. Even knowing what he could do to help, what he had to do, he hesitated. No one was looking at him. No one would know what they were seeing, even if they did look. Finally, reluctantly, he closed his eyes and let himself drift. Let his thoughts drift out, away from him. He had tried denying it from the first, long before his eyes began to change from dark brown to burnished golden yellow. At that first meeting, that first instant of recognition, he had refused to believe, and he had run from the recognition ever since. He still wanted to run. His thoughts drifted, feeling for what must be out there, what was always out there in country where men were few and far between, feeling for his brothers. He did not like to think of them that way, but they were. In the beginning, he had been afraid that what he did had some taint of the Dark One, or of the One Power, equally bad for a man who wanted nothing more than to be a blacksmith and live his life in the light and in peace. From that time, he knew something of how Rand felt, afraid of himself, feeling unclean. He was still not past that entirely. This thing he did was older than humans using the One Power, though, something from the birth of time. Not the power, Moraine had told him. Something long vanished, now come again. Egwene knew too, though he wished she did not. He wished no one did. He hoped she had not told anyone. Contact. He felt them. Felt other minds. Felt his brothers, the wolves. Their thoughts came to him as a whirlpool blend of images and emotions. At first he had not been able to make out anything except the raw emotion, but now his mind put words to them. Wolf brother. Surprise. Two legs that talks. A faded image, dim with time, old beyond old, of men running with wolves, two packs hunting together. We have heard this comes again. You are Longtooth? It was a faint picture of a man dressed in clothes made of hides, with a long knife in his hand, but overlaid on the image, more central, was a shaggy wolf with one tooth longer than the rest. A steel tooth gleaming in the sunlight, as the wolf led the pack in a desperate charge through deep snow toward the deer that would mean life instead of slow death by starvation. And the deer thrashed to run in powder to their bellies, and the sun glinting on the white until it hurt the eyes, and the wind howling down the passes, swirling the fine snow like mist, and wolves' names were always complex images. Perrin recognized the man, Elias Machira, who had first introduced him to wolves. Sometimes he wished he had never met Elias. No, he thought, and tried to picture himself in his mind. Yes, we have heard of you. It was not he had made, a young man with heavy shoulders and shaggy brown curls, a young man with an axe at his belt, who others thought moved and thought slowly. That man was there, somewhere in the mind picture that came from the wolves. But stronger by far was a massive wild bull with curved horns of shining metal, running through the night with the speed and exuberance of youth, curly-haired coat gleaming in the moonlight, flinging himself in among white cloaks on their horses, with the air crisp and cold and dark, and blood so red on the horns, and young bull. For a moment, Perrin lost the contact in his shock. He had not dreamed they had given him a name. He wished he could not remember how he had earned it. He touched the axe at his belt with its gleaming half-moon blade. I'd help me, I killed 2 men. They would have killed me even quicker, and Egwene, but pushing all that aside, it was done and behind him. He had no wish to remember any of it. He gave the wolves the smell of Rand, of Loial and Hurin, and asked if they had scented the 3. It was one of the things that had come to him with the change in his eyes. He could identify people by their smell, even when he could not see them. He could see more sharply, too, see in anything but pitch darkness. He was always careful to light lamps or candles now, sometimes before anyone else thought they were needed. From the wolves came a view of men on horses approaching the hollow in late day. That was the last they had seen or smelled of Rand or the other 2. Perrin hesitated. The next step would be useless unless he told Ingtar. And Mat will die if we don't find that dagger. Burn you, Rand, why did you take the sniffer? The one time he had gone to the dungeon with Egwene, the smell of Fain had made his hair stand on end. Not even Trollocs had smelled so foul. He had wanted to rip through the bars of the cell and tear the man apart, and finding that inside himself had frightened him more than Fain did. To mask Fain's smell in his own mind, he added the scent of Trollocs before he howled aloud. From the distance came the cries of a wolf pack, and in the hollow, horses stamped and whickered fearfully. Some of the soldiers fingered their long-bladed lances and eyed the rim of the hollow uneasily. Inside Perrin's head, it was much worse. He felt the rage of the wolves, the hate. There were only 2 things wolves hated. All else they merely endured. But fire and Trollocs they hated. and they would go through fire to kill Trollocs. Even more than the Trollocs, Fane's scent had put them into a frenzy, as if they smelled something that made Trollocs seem natural and right. Where? The sky rolled in his head. The land spun. East and west wolves did not know. They knew the movements of sun and moon, the shift of seasons, the contours of the land. Perrin puzzled it out. South. And something more. An eagerness to kill the Trollocs. The wolves would let Young Bull share in the killing. He could bring the two legs with their hard skins if he wanted. But Young Bull and Smoke and Two Deer and Winter Dawn and all the rest of the pack would hunt down the twisted ones who had dared come into their land. The inedible flesh and bitter blood would burn the tongue, but they must be killed. Kill them. Kill the twisted ones. Their fury infected him. His lips peeled back in a snarl, and he took a step to join them, run with them in the hunt, in the killing. With an effort, he broke the contact, except for a thin sense that the wolves were there. He could have pointed to them across the intervening distance. He felt cold inside. I'm a man, not a wolf. Light help me, I am a man. Are you well, Perrin? Matt said, moving closer. He sounded the way he always did, flippant, and bitter under it, too, of late. But he looked worried. That is all I need. Rand run off, and then you get sick. I don't know where I'll find a wisdom to look after you out here. I think I have some willow bark in my saddlebags. I can make you some willow bark tea if Ingtar lets us stay that long. Serve you right if I make it too strong. I'm all right, Matt. Shaking off his friend, he went to find Ingtar. The Shienaran Lord was scanning the ground on the rim with Uno, and Ragan, and Masema. The others frowned at him as he drew Ingtar aside. He made sure Uno and the rest were too far away to hear before he spoke. I don't know where Rand or the others went, Ingtar, but Padan Thane and the Trollocs, and I guess the rest of the Dark Friends, are still heading south. How do you know this? Ingtar said. Perrin drew a deep breath. Wolves told me. He waited for what he was not sure. Laughter, scorn, an accusation of being a Dark Friend, of being mad. Deliberately, he tucked his thumbs behind his belt, away from the axe. I will not kill. Not again. If he tries to kill me for a Dark Friend, I'll run. But I won't kill anybody else. I have heard of things like this, Ingtar said slowly, after a moment. Rumors. There was a warder, a man called Elias Machira, who some said could talk to wolves. He disappeared years ago. He seemed to catch something in Perrin's eyes. You know him? I know him, Perrin said flatly. He's the one. I don't want to talk about it. I didn't ask for it. That's what Rand said. I wish I were home working Master Luhan's forge. These wolves, Ingtar said. They will track the Dark Friends and Trollocs for us? Perrin nodded. Good. I will have the horn, whatever it takes. The Shienaran glanced around at Uno and the others, still searching for tracks. Better not to tell anyone else, though. Wolves are considered good luck in the borderlands. Trollocs fear them. But still, better to keep this between us for the time. Some of them might not understand. I would as soon nobody else ever found out, Perrin said. I will tell them you think you have Huron's talent. They know about that. They're easy with it. Some of them saw you wrinkling your nose back in that village and at the ferry. I've heard jokes about your delicate nose. Yes. You keep us on the trail today. Uno will see enough of their tracks to confirm it is the trail. And before nightfall, every last man will be sure you are a sniffer. I will have the horn. He glanced at the sky and raised his voice. Daylight is wasting. To horse! To Perrin's surprise, the Shienaran seemed to accept Ingtar's story. A few of them looked skeptical. Masema went so far as to spit. But Uno nodded thoughtfully, and that was enough for most. Matt was the hardest to convince. A sniffer? You? You're going to track murderers by smell? Perrin, you're as crazy as Rand. I am the only sane one left from Emmons Field, with Egwene and Nynaeve trotting off to Tar Valon to become... He cut himself short with an uneasy glance for the Shienarans. Perrin took Hurin's place beside Ingtar as the small column rode south. Mat kept up a string of disparaging remarks until Uno found the first tracks left by Trollocs and by men on horses. But Perrin paid him little mind. It was all he could do to keep the wolves from dashing on ahead to kill the Trollocs. The wolves cared only about killing the Twisted Ones. To them, Dark Friends were no different from any other two legs. Perrin could almost see the Dark Friends scattering in a dozen directions, while the wolves slew Trollocs, running away with the horn, running away with the dagger. And once the Trollocs were dead, he did not think he could interest the wolves in tracking the humans, even if he had any idea which of them to track. He had a running argument with them, and sweat covered his forehead long before he got the first flash of images that turned his stomach. He drew rein, stopping his horse dead. The others did the same, looking at him, waiting. He stared straight ahead and cursed softly, bitterly. Wolves would kill men, but men were not a preferred prey. Wolves remembered the old hunting together for one thing, and the two legs tasted bad for another. Wolves were more particular about their food than he would have believed. They would not eat carrion unless they were starving, and few would kill more than they could eat. What Perrin felt from the wolves could best be described as disgust. And there were the images. He could see them much more clearly than he wished. Bodies, women and children, heaped and tethered together. Blood-soaked earth, moves and frenzied attempts to escape. Torn flesh, severed. Vultures flapping, their white wings stained red. Bloody, featherless heads tearing and gorging. He broke loose before his stomach emptied itself. Above some trees in the far distance, he could just make out black specks whirling low, dropping, then rising again. Vultures fighting over their meal. There's something bad up there. He swallowed, meeting Ingtar's gaze. How could he fit telling them into the story of being a sniffer? I don't want to get close enough to look at that. But they'll want to investigate once they can see the vultures. I have to tell them enough so they'll circle around. The people from that I think the Trollocs killed them. Uno began cursing quietly, and some of the other Shienarans muttered to themselves. None of them seemed to take his announcement as odd, though. Lord Ingtar said he was a sniffer, and sniffers could smell killing. And there is someone following us, Ingtar said. Mat turned his horse eagerly. Maybe it's Rand. I knew he wouldn't run out on me. Thin, scattered puffs of dust rose to the north. A horse was running across patches where the grass grew thin. The Shienarans spread out, lances ready, watching in all directions. It was no place to be casual about a stranger. A speck appeared, a horse and rider. A woman to Perrin's eyes, long before anyone else could discern the rider, and quickly drew closer. She slowed to a trot as she came up on them, fanning herself with one hand. A plump, graying woman, with her cloak tied behind her saddle, who blinked and looked gravely. That's one of the Aes Sedai, Mat said disappointedly. I recognize her. Verin. Verin Sedai, Ingtar said sharply, then bowed to her from his saddle. Moiraine Sedai sent me, Lord Ingtar, Verin announced with a satisfied smile. She thought you might need me. Such a gallop I've had. I thought I might not catch you short of Tyrion. Village, of course. Oh, that was very nasty, wasn't it? And that Myrddraal. There were ravens and crows all over the rooftops, but never a one went near it, dead as it was. I had to wave away the Dark One's own weight in flies, though, but I could make out what it was. A shame I did not have time to take it down. I've never had a chance to study it. Suddenly her eyes narrowed, and the absent manner vanished like smoke. Where is Rand al'Thor? Ingtar grimaced. Gone, Verin Sedai. Vanished last night, without a trace. Ogier and Hurin, one of my men. The Ogier, Lord Ingtar. And your sniffer went with him? What would those two have in common with... Ingtar gaped at her, and she snorted. Did you think you could keep something like that secret? She snorted again. Sniffers. Vanished, you say? Yes, Varen said I. Ingtar sounded unsettled. It was never easy discovering Aes Sedai knew the secrets you were trying to keep from them. Perrin hoped Moraine had not told anyone about him. But I have a new sniffer. The Nine Lord gestured to Perrin. I seem to have the ability also. As I swore to. Your company will be welcome if you wish to ride with us. To Perrin's surprise, he did not sound as if he entirely meant it. Varen glanced at Perrin, and he shifted uneasily. A new sniffer? Just when you lose your old one. How providential. You found no tracks. No, of course not. You said no tracks. Oh, that's nice. In the saddle, looking back north, and for a moment, Varen almost wanted to ride back the way she had come. You think their disappearance has something to do with the horn, Aes Sedai? Varen said. The horn? No. No, I think not. But it is odd. Very odd. I do not like odd things until I can understand them. I can have 2 men escort you back to where they disappeared, Varen Sedai. They will have no time to right to it. No. They vanished without a trace. Well, she studied Ingtar, her face unreadable. I will ride with you. Perhaps we will find them again, or they will find us. Talk to me as we ride, Lord Ingtar. Tell me everything you can about the young man. Everything he did, everything he said. They started off in a jingle of harness and armor, Varen riding close beside Ingtar and questioning him closely, but too low to be overheard. She gave Perrin a look when he tried to maintain his place, and he fell back. It's Rand she's after, Matt murmured, not the horn. Perrin nodded. Wherever you've gotten to, Rand, stay there. It's safer than here. Chapter 15. Kinslayer. The way the strangely faded distant hills seemed to slide toward Rand when he passed them, made his head spin, and let him avoid. Sometimes the emptiness crept up on him unawares, but he avoided it like death. Better to be dizzy than share the void with that uneasy light. Better by far to stare at the faded land. Still, he tried not to look at anything too far away unless it lay right ahead of them. Huron wore a fixed look as he concentrated on sniffing the trail, as if he were trying to ignore the land the trail crossed. When the sniffer did notice what lay around them, he would give a start and wipe his hands on his coat, then push his nose forward like a hound, eyes glazing, excluding everything else. Loyal rode slumped in his saddle and frowned as he glanced around, ears twitching uneasily, muttering to himself. Again they crossed land blackened and burned, even the soil crunching under the horses' hooves, as if it had been seared. The burned swathes, sometimes a mile wide, sometimes 200 paces, all ran east and west, as straight as an arrow's flight. Twice Rand saw the end of a burn, once as they rode over it, once as they passed nearby. They tapered to points at the ends. At least the ends he saw were so, but he suspected they were all the same. Once he had watched Watley Eldon decorate a cart for Sunday back home in Emmons Field, Watt painting the scenes in bright colors and the intricate scroll work that surrounded them. For the borders, Watt let the point of his brush touch the cart, making a thin line that grew thicker as he pressed harder, then thinner again as he eased up. That was how the land looked, as if someone had streaked it with a monstrous brush of fire. Nothing grew where the burns were, though some burns, at least, had the feel of a thing long done. Not so much as a hint of char remained in the air there, not a whiff even when he leaned down to break off a black twig and smell it. Old, yet nothing had come in to reclaim the land. Black gave way to green, and green to black, along knife-edge lines. In its own way, the rest of the land lay as dead as the burns, though grass covered the ground and leaves covered the trees. Everything had that faded look, like clothes too often washed and too long left in the sun. There were no birds or animals, not that Rand saw or heard. No hawk wheeling in the sky, no bark of a hunting fox, no bird singing. Nothing rustled in the grass or lit on a tree branch. No bees or butterflies. Several times they crossed streams, the water shallow. Though often it had dug itself a deep gully with steep banks, the horses had to scramble down and climb on the other side. The water ran clear, except for the mud the horses' hooves stirred, but never a minnow or tadpole wriggled out of the roiling. Not even a water spider danced across the surface, or a hovering lacewing. The water was drinkable, which was just as well, since their water bottles could not last forever. Rand tasted it first and made Loyal and Huron wait to see if anything happened to him before he let them drink. He had gotten them into this. It was his responsibility. The water was cool and wet, but that was the best that could be said for it. It tasted flat, as if it had been boiled. Loyal made a face, and the horses did not like it either, shaking their heads and drinking reluctantly. There was one sign of life, at least Rand thought it must be so. Twice he saw a wispy streak crawling across the sky like a line drawn with cloud. The lines were too straight to be natural, it seemed, but he could not imagine what might make them. He did not mention the lines to others. Perhaps they did not see, Huron intent on the trail as he was, and Loyal drawn in on himself. They said nothing of the lines at any rate. When they had ridden half the morning, Loyal abruptly swung down from his huge horse without a word, and strode to a stand of giant's broom, their trunks splitting into many thick branches, stiff and straight, not a pace above the ground. At the top, all split again into leafy brush that gave them their name. Rand pulled Red up and started to ask what he was doing, but something about the Ogier's manner, as if he himself were uncertain, kept Rand silent. After staring at the tree, Loyal put his hands on a trunk and began to sing in a deep, soft rumble. Rand had heard Ogier tree song once, when Loyal had sung to a dying tree and brought it back to life. And he had heard of sung wood, objects wrought from trees by the tree song. The talent was fading, Loyal said. He was one of the few who had the ability now. That was what made sung wood even more sought after and treasured. When he had heard Loyal sing before, it had been as if the earth itself sang. But now the Ogier murmured his song almost diffidently, and the land echoed it in a whisper. It seemed pure song, music without words, at least none that Rand could make out. If there were words, they faded into the music just as it pours into a stream. Huron gasped and stared. Rand was not sure what it was Loyal did, or how. Soft as the song was, it caught him up hypnotically, filling his mind almost the way the void did. Loyal ran his big hands along the trunk, singing, caressing with his voice as well as his fingers. The trunk now seemed smoother somehow, as if his stroking were shaping it. Rand blinked. He was sure the piece Loyal worked on had had branches at its top just like the others, but now it stopped in a rounded end, right above the Ogier's head. Rand opened his mouth, but the song quieted him. It seemed so familiar, that song, as if he should know it. Abruptly, Loyal's voice rose to a climax, almost a hymn of thanks it sounded, and ended, fading as a breeze fades. "Burn me," Huron breathed. He looked stunned. "Burn me? I never heard anything like... Burn me." In his hands, Loyal held a staff as tall as he was, and as thick as Rand's forearm, smooth and polished. Where the trunk had been on the giant's broom was a small stem of new growth. Rand took a deep breath. Always something new. Always something I didn't expect. And sometimes it isn't horrible. He watched Loyal mount, resting the staff across his saddle in front of him, and wondered why the Ogier wanted a staff at all, since they were riding. Then he saw the thick rod, not as big as it was, but in relation to the Ogier, saw the way Loyal handled it. "A quarterstaff," he said, surprised. "I didn't know Ogier carried weapons, Loyal."
"Usually we do not," the Ogier replied, almost curtly. "Usually. The price has always been too high."
He hefted the huge quarterstaff and wrinkled his broad nose with distaste.
"Elder Hammond would surely say I am putting a long handle on my axe. But I am not just being hasty or rash, Rand. This place,
He shivered and his ears twitched. "We'll find our way back soon," Rand said, trying to sound confident. Loyal spoke as if he had not heard.
Everything is linked, Rand. Whether it lives or not, whether it thinks or not, everything that is fits together. The tree does not think, but it is part of the whole, and the whole has a feeling. I can't explain any more than I can explain what being happy is. But, Rand, this land was glad for a weapon to be made. Glad.
"The lights shine on us," Huron murmured nervously, "and the Creator's hand shelter us. Though we go to the last embrace of the Mother, the light illumine our way." He kept repeating the catechism, as if it had a charm to protect him. Rand resisted the impulse to look around. He definitely did not look up. All it would take to break them all was another of those smoky lines across the sky right at that moment. "There's nothing here to hurt us," he said firmly, "and we'll keep a good watch and make sure nothing does." He wanted to laugh at himself, sounding so certain. He was not certain about anything, but watching the others, Loyal with his tufted ears drooping, and Huron trying not to look at anything, he knew one of them had to seem to be sure, at least, or fear and uncertainty would break them all apart. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills. He squeezed that thought out. Nothing to do with the wheel. Nothing to with ta'veren, or Aes Sedai, or the dragon. It's just the way it is, that's all. "Loyal, are you done here?" The Ogier nodded, regretfully rubbing the quarterstaff. Rand turned to Huron. "Do you still have the trail?" "I do, Lord Rand, I do that." "Then let's keep on with it. Once we find Thane and the Dark Friends, why, we'll go home heroes with the dagger from At and the Horn of Valere. Lead out, Huron." "Heroes? I'll settle for all of us getting out of here alive."
"I do not like this place,"
the Ogier announced flatly. He held the quarterstaff as if he expected to have to use it soon. "As well we don't mean to stay here then, isn't it?" Rand said. Huron barked a laugh as if he had made a joke, but Loyal gave him a level look.
"As well we don't, Rand."
Yet as they rode on southward, he could see that his casual assumption that they would get home had picked them both up a little. Huron sat a bit straighter in his saddle, and Loyal's ears did not seem so wilted. It was no time or place to let them know he shared their fear, so he kept it to himself and fought it by himself. Huron kept his humor through the morning, murmuring, "As well we don't mean to stay," then chuckling until Rand felt like telling him to be quiet. Toward midday, the sniffer did fall silent, though, shaking his head and frowning, and Rand found he wished the man was still repeating his words and laughing. "Is there something wrong with the trail, Huron?" he asked. The sniffer shrugged, looking troubled. "Yes, Lord Rand. And then again, no, as you might say." "It must be one or the other. Have you lost the trail? No shame if you have. You said it was weak to start. If we can't find the Dark Friends, we will find another stone and get back that way." Light, anything but that. Rand kept his face smooth. "If Dark Friends can come here and leave, so can we." "Oh, I haven't lost it, Lord Rand. I can still pick out the stink of them. It isn't that. It's just... It's..." With a grimace, Huron burst out. "It's like I'm remembering it, Lord Rand, instead of smelling it. But I'm not. There's dozens of trails crossing it all the time. Dozens and dozens, and all sorts of smells of violence. Some of them fresh, almost. Only washed out like everything else. This morning, right after we left the hollow, I could have sworn there were hundreds slaughtered right under my feet, just minutes before. But there weren't any bodies, and not a mark on the grass but our own hoof prints. A thing like that couldn't happen without the ground being torn up and bloodied. But there wasn't a mark. It's all like that, my lord. But I am following the trail. I am. This place just has me all on edge. That's it. That must be it." Rand glanced at Loyal. The Ogier did come up with the oddest knowledge at times, but he looked as puzzled as Huron. Rand made his voice more confident than he felt. "I know you are doing your best, Huron. We are all of us on edge. Just follow as best you can, and we'll find them. As you say, Lord Rand. Huron booted his horse forward. As you say. But by nightfall, there was still no sign of the Dark Friends, and Huron said the trail was fainter still. The sniffer kept muttering to himself about remembering. There had been no sign, really no sign. Rand was not as good a tracker as Uno, but any boy in the Two Rivers was expected to track well enough to find a lost sheep or a rabbit for dinner. He had seen nothing. It was as if no living thing had ever disturbed the land before they came. There should have been something if the Dark Friends were ahead of them, but Huron kept following the trail he said he smelled. As the sun touched the horizon, they made camp in a stand of trees untouched by the burn, eating from their saddlebags. Flat bread and dried meat washed down with flat-tasting water. Hardly a filling meal, tough and far from tasty. Rand thought they might have enough for a week. After that... Huron ate slowly, determinedly, but Loyal gulped his down with a grimace and settled back with his pipe, the big quarterstaff close at hand. Rand kept their fire small and well hidden in the trees. Thane and his Dark Friends and Trollocs might be close enough to see a fire, for all of Huron's worries about the oddness of their trail. It seemed odd to him that he had begun to think of them as Fane's Dark Friends, Fane's Trollocs. Fane was just a madman. Then why did they rescue him? Fane had been part of the Dark One's scheme to find him. Perhaps it had something to do with that. Then why is he running instead of chasing me? What killed that Fane? What happened in that room full of flies? And those eyes watching me in Thaldara? And that wind catching me like a beetle in pine sap? No, Baalzamon has to be dead. The Aes Sedai did not believe it. Moraine did not believe it, nor the Amyrlin. Stubbornly, he refused to think about it any longer. All he had to think about now was finding that dagger for Mat, finding Fane and the horn. It's never over, Althor. The voice was like a thin breeze whispering in the back of his head, a thin, icy murmur working its way into the crevices of his mind. He almost sought the void to escape it, but remembering what waited for him there, he pushed down the desire. In the half-dark of twilight, he worked the forms with his sword, the way Lan had taught, though without the void, parting the silk, hummingbird kisses the honey rose, heron waiting in the rushes for balance. Losing himself in the swift, sure movements, forgetting for a time where he was, he worked until sweat covered him. Yet when he was done, it all came back. Nothing had changed. The weather was not cold, but he shivered and pulled his cloak around him as he hunched by the fire. The others caught his mood, and they finished eating quickly and in silence. No one complained when he kicked dirt over the last fitful flames. Rand took the first watch himself, walking the edges of the copse with his bow, sometimes easing his sword in its scabbard. The chill moon was almost full, standing high in the blackness, and the night was as silent as the day had been, as empty. Empty was the right word. The land was as empty as a dusky milk crock. It was hard to believe there was anyone in the whole world, in this world, except for the three of them. Hard to believe even the Dark Friends were there, somewhere ahead. To keep himself company, he unwrapped Tom Merrilin's cloak, exposing the harp and flute in their hard leather cases atop the many-colored patches. He took the gold and silver flute from its case, remembering the gleeman teaching him as he fingered it, and played a few notes of The Wind That Shakes the Willow, softly so as not to wake the others. Even soft, the sad sound was too loud in that place, too real. With a sigh, he replaced the flute and did up the bundle again. He held the watch long into the night, letting the others sleep. He did not know how late it was when he suddenly realized a fog had risen. Close to the ground it lay, thick, making Huron and Loyal indistinct mounds, seeming to hump out of clouds. Thinner higher up, it still shrouded the land around them, hiding everything except the nearest trees. The moon seemed viewed through watered silk. Anything at all could come right up to him unseen. He touched his sword. Swords do no good against me, Lews Therin. You should know that. The fog swirled around Rand's feet as he spun, the sword coming into his hands, Aaron marked blade upright before him. The void leaped up inside him. For the first time, he barely noticed the tainted light of Sidene. A shadowy figure drew nearer through the mist, walking with a tall staff. Behind it, as if the shadow's shadow were vast, the fog darkened till it was blacker than night. Rand's skin crawled. Closer the figure came, but resolved into the shape of a man, clothed and gloved in black, with a black silk mask covering his face, and the shadow came with it. His staff was black too, as if the wood had been charred, smooth and shining like water by moonlight. For an instant, the eye holes of the mask glowed as if fire stood behind them rather than eyes. But Rand did not need that to know who it was. Balzaman, he breathed. This is a dream. It has to be. I fell asleep and... Balzaman laughed like the roar of an open furnace. You always try to deny what is, Luz Theron. If I stretch out my hand, I can touch you, Kinslayer. I can always touch you. Always and
what's going on with
everywhere.
my camera, everyone.
I'm not the dragon. My name is Randall. Rand clamped his teeth shut to stop himself. Oh, I know the name you use now, Luz Theron. I know every name you have used through age after age, long before you were even the Kinslayer. Balzaman's voice began to rise in intensity. Sometimes the fires of his eyes flared so high that Rand could see them through the openings in the silk mask. See them like endless seas of flame. I know you. Know your blood and your line back to the first spark of life that ever was. Back to the first moment. You can never hide from me. Never! We are tied together as surely as two sides of the same coin. Ordinary men may hide in the sweep of the pattern, but Ta'Viren stand out like beacon fires on a hill. And you stand out as if 10,000 shining arrows stood in the sky to point you out. You are mine, and ever in the reach of my hand. Father of lies, Rand managed. Despite the void, his tongue wanted to cleave to the roof of his mouth. Light, please let it be a dream. The thought skittered outside the emptiness. Even one of those dreams that isn't a dream. He can't really be standing in front of me. The Dark One is sealed in Chael Ghul, sealed by the Creator at the moment of creation. He knew too much of the truth for it to help. You're well named. If you could just take me, why haven't you? Because you cannot. I walk in the light, and you cannot touch me. Balzaman leaned on his staff and looked at Rand a moment, then moved to stand over Loyal and Huron, peering down at them. The vast shadow moved with him. He did not disturb the fog, Rand saw. He moved, the staff swung with his steps, but the gray mist did not swirl and eddy around his feet as it did around
Plug it in
Rand's.
now.
That gave him heart. Perhaps Balzaman was really not there. Perhaps it was a dream. You find odd followers, Balzaman mused.
Almost lost their life. I was about to go dead.
These two. The girl who
Oh,
tries
dear.
to watch over you.
Playing more combat.
Poor Guardian and Kinslayer. If she had a lifetime to grow, she would never grow strong enough for you to hide behind. Girl? Who? Moraine is surely not a girl. I don't know what you're talking about, Father of Lies. You lie and lie, and even when you tell the truth, you twist it to a lie. Do I, Luz Theron? You know what you are, who you are. I have told you, and so have those women of Tar Valon. Rand shifted and gave a laugh like a small thunderclap. They think themselves safe in their white tower, but my followers number even some of their own. The Aes Sedai called Moraine told you who you are, did she not? Did she lie? Or is she one of mine? The White Hound to use you like a hound on a leash. Do I lie? Do I lie when I say you seek the horn of the ear? He laughed again. Calm of the void or no, it was all Rand could do, not to cover his ears.
That was a rough one.
Sometimes old
At least on
enemies
this
fight
side.
so long that they become allies and never realize it. They think
The
they
other side's
strike
a little
at
bit
you,
more smoother.
but they have become so closely linked
It is as if you guided the blow yourself.
You don't guide me,
Rand said.
I deny you. I have 1,000 strings tied to you, Kinslayer. Each one finer than silk and stronger than steel. Time has tied 1,000 cords between us. The battle we two have fought, do you remember any part of that? You have any glimmering that we have fought before? Battles without number, back to the beginning of time? I know much that you do not. That battle will soon end. The last battle is coming. The last, Lews Therin. Do you really think you can avoid it? You poor, shivering worm. You will serve me or die. And this time the cycle will not begin anew with your death. The grave belongs to the great Lord of the Dark. This time, if you die, you will be destroyed utterly. This time the wheel will be broken, whatever you do, and the world remade to a new mold. Serve me! Serve Shaitan, or be destroyed forever!
With the utterance of that name, the air seemed to thicken. The darkness behind Baalzamon swelled and grew, threatening to swallow everything. Rand felt it engulfing him, colder than ice and hotter than coals, both at the same time, blacker than death, sucking him into the depths of it, overwhelming the world. He gripped his sword hilt till his knuckles hurt. I deny you, and I deny your power. I walk in the light. The light preserves us, and we shelter in the palm of the Creator's hand. He blinked. Baalzamon still stood there, and the great darkness still hung behind him. But it was as if all the rest had been illusion. Do you want to see my face? It was a whisper. Rand swallowed. No. You should. A gloved hand went to the black mask. No! The mask came away. It was a man's face, horribly burned. Yet between the black-edged red crevices crossing those features, the skin looked healthy and smooth. Dark eyes looked at Rand. Cruel lips smiled with a flash of white teeth. Look at me, Kinslayer, and see the 100th part of your own fate. For a moment, eyes and mouth became doorways into endless caverns of fire. This is what the power unchecked can do, even to me. But I heal, Lews Therin. I know the paths to greater power. It will burn you like a moth flying into a furnace. I will not touch it. Rand felt the void around him, felt Saidin. I won't. You cannot stop yourself. Leave me alone! Power. Baalzamon's voice became soft, insinuating. You can have power again, Lews Therin. You are linked to it now, this moment. I know it. I can see it. Feel it, Lews Therin. Feel the glow inside you. Feel the power that could be yours. All you must do is reach out for it. But the shadow is there between you and it. Madness and death. You need not die, Lews Therin. Not ever again. No, Rand said, but the voice went on, burrowing into him. I can teach you to control that power, so that it does not destroy you. No one else lives who can teach you that. The great Lord of the Dark can shelter you from the madness.
Hey, Trizit, how you doing?
The power can be yours, and you can live forever.
What are you up to?
Forever. All you must do in return is serve. Only serve. Simple words. I am yours, great Lord. And power will be yours.
A little foregrammer.
Power beyond anything those women of Tar Valon dream of. And life eternal. If you will only offer yourself
2 grams on one
and
side
serve.
and 2 grams on the other side of
Rand licked
2
his
different
lips.
flavors.
Not to go mad.
Hit it through.
Not to die. Never. I walk in the light, he grated hoarsely. And you can never
That
touch
side
me.
or
Touch you, Lews Therin. Touch you.
I can consume you. Taste it and know as I knew. Those dark eyes became again, and that mouth, flame that blossomed and grew until it seemed brighter than a summer sun. Grew, and suddenly Rand's sword glowed as if just drawn from the forge. He cried out as the hilt burned his hands, screamed and dropped the sword. And the fog caught fire, fire that leaped, fire that
So you got Diablo.
Yelling, Rand beat at his clothes as they smoked and charred and fell in ashes. Beat with his hands that blackened and shriveled as naked flesh cracked and peeled away in the flames. He screamed. Pain beat at the void inside him, and he tried to crawl deeper into the emptiness. The glow was there, the tainted light just out of sight. Half mad, no longer caring what it was, he reached for Saidin, tried to wrap it around him, tried to hide in it from the burning and the pain. As suddenly as the fire began, it was gone. Rand stared wonderingly at his hand, sticking out of the red sleeve of his coat. There was not so much as a singe on the wool. I imagined it all. Frantically, he looked around. Ba'alzamon was gone. Huron shifted in his sleep. The Sniffer and Loyal were still only two mounds sticking up out of the low fog. I did imagine it. Before relief had a chance to grow, pain stabbed his right hand, and he turned it up to look. There, across the palm, was branded a heron. The heron from the hilt of his sword. Angry and red. As neatly done as though drawn from an artist's skill. Fumbling a kerchief from his coat pocket, he wrapped it around his hand. The hand throbbed now. The void would help with that. He was aware of the pain in the void, but he did not feel it. But he put the thought out of his head. Twice now, unknowing, and once on purpose. He could not forget that. He had tried to channel the one power while he was in the void. It was with that Ba'alzamon wanted to tempt him. It was that Moraine and the Amyrlin seat wanted him to do. He would not. Chapter 16. In the Mirror of Darkness.
Yes, he's still there, Trizit.
You should not have done it, Lord Rand, Huron said when Rand woke the others just at daybreak. The sun yet hid below the horizon, but there was light enough to see. The fog had melted away, while dark still held, fading reluctantly. If you use yourself up to spare us, my lord, who will see to getting us home? I needed to think, Rand said. Nothing showed the fog had ever been, or Ba'alzamon. He fingered the kerchief wrapped around his right hand. There was that to prove Ba'alzamon had been there. He wanted to be away from this place. Time to be in the saddle if we are going to catch Fane's dark friends. Pastime. We can eat flatbread while we ride. Loyal paused in the act of stretching, his arms reaching as high as Huron could have, standing on Rand's shoulders.
Your hand, Rand. What happened?
I heard it. It's nothing.
I have a salve in my saddlebags.
It is nothing. Rand knew he sounded harsh, but one look at the brand would surely bring questions he did not want to answer. Time's wasting. Let's be on our way. He set about saddling Red, awkwardly because of his injured hand, and Huron jumped to his own horse.
No need to be so touchy,
Loyal muttered. A track, Rand decided as they set out, would be something natural in that world. There were too many unnatural things there. Even a single hoof print would be welcome. Bane and the Dark Friends and the Trollocs had to leave some mark. He concentrated on the ground they passed over, trying to make out any trace that could have been made by another living thing. There was nothing. Not a turned stone, not a disturbed clod of earth. Once he looked at the ground behind them just to reassure himself that the land did take hoofprints. Scraped turf and bent grass marked their passage plainly. Yet ahead, the ground was undisturbed. But Huron insisted he could smell the trail, faint and thin, but still heading south. Once again, the sniffer put all his attentions on the trail he followed, like a hound tracking deer, and once again Loyal rode lost in his own thoughts, muttering to himself and rubbing the huge quarterstaff held across his saddle in front of him. They had not been riding more than an hour when Rand saw the spire ahead. He was so busy watching for tracks that the tapering column already stood thick and tall above the trees in the middle distance when he first noticed it. I wonder what that is. It lay directly in their path.
I don't know what it can be, Rand, Loyal said.
If this was our own world, Lord Rand. Huron shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Well, that monument Lord Ingtar was talking about, the one to honor Hawkwing's victory over the Trollocs, it was a great spire. But it was torn down 1,000 years ago. There's nothing left but a big mound, like a hill. I saw it when I went to Cairhien for Lord Agelmar.
According to Ingtar, Loyal said, that is still 3 or 4 days ahead of us, if it is here at all. I don't know why it should be. I don't think there are any people here at all.
The sniffer put his eyes back on the ground. Well, that's just it, isn't it, Builder? No people, but there it is ahead of us. Maybe we ought to keep clear of it, my Lord Rand. No telling what it is, or who's there in a place like this. Rand drummed his fingers in the high pommel of his saddle for a moment, thinking. We have to stick as close to the trail as we can, he said finally. We don't seem to be getting any closer to Fane as it is, and I don't want to lose more time if we can avoid it. If we see any people or anything out of the ordinary, then we'll circle around it until we pick it up again. But until then, we keep on. As you say, my lord. The sniffer sounded odd, and he gave Rand a quick sidelong look. As you say. Rand frowned for a moment before he understood, and then it was his turn to sigh. Lords did not explain to those who followed them, only to other lords. I didn't ask him to take me for a bloody lord. But he did, a small voice seemed to answer him. And you let him. You made the choice. Now the duty is yours. Take the trail, Huron, Rand said. With a flash of relieved grin, the sniffer heeled his horse onward. The weak sun climbed as they rode, and by the time it was overhead, they were only a mile or so from the spire. They had reached one of the streams, in a gully a pace deep, and the intervening trees were sparse. Rand could see the mound it was built on, like a round, flat-topped hill. The gray spire itself rose at least 100 spans, and he could just make out now that the top was carved in the likeness of a bird with outstretched wings. A hawk, Rand said. It is Hawkwing's monument. It must be. There were people here, whether there are now or not. They just built it in another place here, and never tore it down. Think of it, Huron. When we get back, you'll be able to tell them what the monument really looked like.
But at least you got a comfortable bed.
There will only be 3 of us in the whole world who have ever seen it. Huron nodded. Yes, my lord. My children would like to hear that tale. Their father seeing Hawkwing's spire.
Rand,
Loyal began worriedly. We can gallop the distance, Rand said. Come on. A gallop will do us good. This place may be dead, but we're alive.
Rand,
Loyal said.
I don't think that is a...
So you got a Diablo for your switch.
Rand dug his boots into Red's flanks, and the stallion sprang forward. He splashed across the shallow ribbon of water in 2 strides, then scrabbled up the far side. Huron launched his horse right behind him.
Nice.
Rand heard Loyal calling behind them, but he laughed.
Because on my characters, they're...
If he kept his eyes on one spot,
212 or 200 and something
the wind felt good on his face. The mound covered a good 2 high, but the grassy slope rose at an easy slant. The gray spire reared into the sky, squared and broad enough despite its height to seem massive, almost squat. Rand's laughter died, and he pulled Red up, his face grim. Is that Hawkwing's monument, Lord Rand? Huron asked uneasily. It doesn't look right somehow.
But I gotta do
that, the harsh, angular
that PlayStation membership if I could
some of the
play online with you.
Chiseled as tall as a man. The horn skull of the double Trollocs, the iron fist of the Daimon, the trident of the Cobalt, and the whirlwind of the Afrite. There was a hawk, too, carved near the bottom. With a wingspan of 10 paces, it lay on its back, pierced by a lightning bolt, and ravens pecked at its eyes. The huge wings atop the spire seemed to block the sun. He heard Loyal.
Yeah, the Nintendo Online thing.
I tried to tell you, Rand, Loyal said. It is a raven, not a hawk. I could see it clearly.
Huron turned his horse, refusing even to look at the spire any longer. But how? Rand said. Arthur Hawkwing had victory over the Trollocs here.
Once I get that, we'll
Ingtar
be able to
said
play
so.
online.
Not here, Loyal
So I'll
said
be able
slowly.
to actually level you up pretty
Obviously
good.
not here. From stone to stone run the lines of it, between the worlds that might be. I've been thinking on it, and I believe I know what the worlds that might be are. Maybe I do. Worlds our world might have been if things had happened differently. Maybe that's why it is all so washed out looking. Because it's an if, a maybe, just a shadow of the real world. In this world, I think the Trollocs won. Maybe that's why we have not seen any villages or people.
Rand's skin crawled. Where Trollocs won, they did not leave humans alive except for food. If they had won across an entire world, if the Trollocs had won, they would be everywhere. We'd have seen 1,000 of them by now. We'd be dead since yesterday.
I do not know, Rand. Perhaps after they killed the people, they killed one another. Trollocs live to kill. That's all they do. That is all they are. I just don't know.
Lord Rand, Huron said abruptly. Something moved down there. Rand whirled his horse, ready to see charging Trollocs, but Huron was pointing back the way they had come, at nothing. What did you see, Huron? Where? The sniffer let his arm drop. We're right at the edge of that clump of trees there, about a mile. I thought it was a woman. And something else I couldn't make out, but... He shivered. It's so hard to make out things that aren't under your nose. This place has my guts all a-whirl. I'm likely imagining things, my lord. This is a place for queer fancies. His shoulders hunched as if he felt the spire pressing on them. No doubt it was just the wind, my lord. Loyal said.
There's something else to consider, I'm afraid.
He sounded troubled again. He pointed southward.
What do you see off there?
Rand squinted against the way things far off seemed to slide toward him. Land like we've been crossing, trees, then some hills and mountains. Nothing else. What do you want me to see?
The mountains,
Loyal sighed. The tufts of his head drooped, and the ends of his eyebrows were down on his cheeks.
That has to be Kinslayer's dagger, Rand. There aren't any other mountains they could be. Unless this world is completely different from ours. But Kinslayer's dagger lies more than 100 leagues south of the Eranin. A good bit more. Distances are hard to judge in this place, but I think we will reach them before dark.
He did not have to say any more. They could not have covered over 100 leagues in less than 3 days. Without thinking, Rand muttered, maybe this place is like the Ways. He heard Huron moan, and instantly regretted not keeping a rein on his tongue. It was not a pleasant thought. Enter a way gate, they could be found just outside Ogier Steading, and in Ogier Groves. Enter and walk for a day, and you could leave by another way gate 100 leagues from where you started. The ways were dark now, and foul, and to travel them meant to risk death or madness. Even Fades feared to travel the ways.
If it is Rand,
Loyal said slowly,
can a misstep kill us here too? Are there things we have not yet seen that can do worse than kill us?
Huron moaned again. They had been drinking the water, riding along as if they had not a concern in the world. Unconcern would kill quickly in the Ways. Rand swallowed, hoping his stomach would settle. It is too late for worrying about what is past, he said. From here on, though, we will watch our step. He glanced at Huron. The sniffer's head had sunk between his shoulders, and his eyes darted as if he wondered what would leap at him, and from where. The man had run down murderers, but this was more than he had ever bargained for. Hold on to yourself, Huron. You're not dead yet, and we won't be. We will just have to be careful from here on, that's all. It was at that moment they heard the scream, thin with distance. A woman, Huron said. Even this much that was normal seemed to rouse him a little. I knew I saw. Another scream came, more desperate than the first. Not unless she can fly, Rand said. She's south of us. He kicked Red to a dead run in 2 strides.
Be careful, you said,
Loyal shouted after him.
Light, Rand, remember, be careful.
Rand lay low on Red's back, letting the stallion run. The screams drew him on. It was easy to say be careful, but there was terror in that woman's voice. She did not sound as if she had time for him to be careful. On the edge of another stream, in a sheer-banked channel, deeper than most, he drew rein. Hid in a shower of stones and dirt. The screams were coming... there. He took it all in at a glance. Perhaps 200 paces away, the woman stood beside her horse in the stream, both of them backed against the far bank. With a broken length of branch, she was fending off a snarling... something. Rand swallowed, stunned for a moment. If a frog were as big as a bear, or if a bear had a frog's gray-green hide, it might look like that. A big bear. Not letting himself think about the creature, he leaped to the ground, unlimbering his bow. If he took the time to ride closer, it might be too late. The woman was barely keeping the thing at the edge of the branch. It was a fair distance. He kept blinking as he tried to judge it. The distance seemed to change by spans every time the thing moved. He had a big target. His bandaged hand made drawing awkward, but he had an arrow loosed almost before his feet were set. The shaft sank into the leathery hide for half its length, and the creature spun to face Rand. Rand took a step back despite the distance. That huge, wedge-shaped head had never been on any animal he could imagine, nor that wide, horny-lipped beak of a mouth, hooked for ripping flesh. And it had 3 eyes, small and fierce, and ringed by hard-looking ridges. Gathering itself, the thing bounded toward him down the stream in great splashing leaps. To Rand's eye, some of the leaps seemed to cover twice as much distance as others, though he was sure they were all the same. An eye, the woman called. She sounded surprisingly calm, considering her screams. You must hit an eye to kill it. He drew the fletching of another arrow back to his ear. Reluctantly, he saw it. He did not want to, but it was for this that Tam had taught him, and he knew he could never make the shot without it. My father, he thought with a sense of loss, and emptiness filled him. The quavering light of Sidene was there, but he shut it away. He was one with the bow, with the arrow, with the monstrous shape leaping toward him. One with the tiny eye. He did not even feel the arrow leave the bowstring. The creature rose in another bound, and at the peak, the arrow struck its central eye. The thing landed, fountain another huge splash of water and mud. Ripples spread out from it, but it did not move. Well shot, and bravely, the woman called. She was on her horse, riding to meet him. Rand felt vaguely surprised that she had not run once the thing's attention was diverted. She rode past the bulk, still surrounded by the ripples of its dying, without even a downward glance, scrambled her horse up the bank, and dismounted. Few men would stand to face the charge of a Grom, my lord. She was all in white, her dress divided for riding and belted in silver, and her boots, peeking out from under her hems, were tooled in silver too. Even her saddle was white and silver-mounted. Her snowy mare, with its arched neck and dainty step, was almost as tall as Rand's bay. But it was the woman herself, she was perhaps Nynaeve's age, he thought, who held his eyes. She was tall, for one thing, a hand taller, and she could almost look him in the eyes. For another, she was beautiful, ivory pale skin contrasting sharply with long, night-dark hair and black eyes. He had seen beautiful women. Moraine was beautiful, if cool, and so was Nynaeve when her temper did not get the better of her. Egwene and Elaine, the daughter heir of Andor, were each enough to take a man's breath. But this woman... His tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. He felt his heart start beating again.
Your retainers, my lord?
Startled, he looked around. Huron and Loyal had joined them. Huron was staring the way Rand knew he had been, and even the Ogier seemed fascinated.
My friends, he said. Loyal and Huron. My name is Rand. Rand al'Thor.
I have never thought of it before,
Loyal said abruptly, sounding as if he were talking to himself.
But if there is such a thing as perfect human beauty in face and form, then you...
Loyal! Rand shouted. The Ogier's ears stiffened in embarrassment. Rand's own ears were red. Loyal's words had been too close to what he himself was thinking. The woman laughed musically, but the next instant she was all regal formality, like a queen on her throne.
I am called Selene, she said. You have risked your life and saved mine. I am yours, Lord Rand al'Thor.
And to Rand's horror, she knelt before him. Not looking at Huron or Loyal, he hastily pulled her to her feet. A man who will not die to save a woman is no man. Immediately, he disgraced himself by blushing. It was a Shienaran saying, and he knew it sounded pompous before it was out of his mouth. But her manner had infected him, and he could not stop it. I mean, that is, it was...
Fool, you can't tell a woman saving her life was nothing.
It was my honor. That sounded vaguely Shienaran and formal. He hoped it would do. His mind was as blank of anything else to say as if he were still in the void. Suddenly he became conscious of her eyes on him. Her expression had not changed, but her dark eyes made him feel as if he were naked. Unbidden, the thought came of Selene with no clothes. His face went red again. Where are you from, Selene? We have not seen another human being since we came. Is your town nearby? She looked at him thoughtfully, and he stepped back. Her look made him too aware of how close to her he was.
I am not from this world, my lord, she said. There are no people here. Nothing living except the Grolm, and a few other creatures like them. I am from Cairhien. And as to how I came here, I don't know exactly. I was riding out, and I stopped to nap, and when I woke, my horse and I were here. I can only hope, my lord, that you can save me again, and help me go home.
Selene, I am not a... That is... Please call me Rand. He felt his ears hot again.
Right, it won't hurt anything if she thinks I'm a lord.
Burn me, it won't hurt anything.
If you wish it, Rand.
Her smile made his throat tighten.
You will help me?
Of course I will.
Burn me, but she's beautiful, and looking at me like I'm a hero in a story.
He shook his head, declared of foolishness. But first we have to find the men we are following. I'll try to keep you out of danger, but we must find them. Coming with us will be better than staying here alone. For a moment she was silent, her face blank and smooth. Rand had no idea what she was thinking, except that she seemed to be studying him anew.
A man of duty, she said finally.
A small smile touched her lips.
I like that. Yes. Who are these miscreants you follow?
The dark friends and Trollocs, milady, Huron burst out. He made an awkward bow to her from his saddle. They did murder in Feldara Keep, and stole the horn of Val'ir, my lady. But Lord Rand will fetch it back. Rand stared at the sniffer ruefully. Huron gave a weak grin.
So much for secrecy.
It did not matter here, he supposed, but once back in their world... Selene, you must not say anything of the horn to anyone. If it gets out, we'll have 100 people on our heels trying to get the horn for themselves.
No, it would never do,
Selene said.
For that to fall into the wrong hands. The horn of Val'ir. I could not tell you how often I've dreamed of touching it, holding it in my hands. You must promise me when you have it, you will let me touch it.
Before I can do that, we have to find it. We had better be on our way.
Rand offered his hand to help her mount. Huron scrambled down to hold her stirrup. Whatever that thing was I killed, a Grolm? There may be more of them around. Her hand was firm. There was surprising strength in her grip, and her skin was silk? Something softer, smoother. Rand shivered. There always are, Celine said. The tall white mare frisked and bared her teeth once at Red, yet Celine's touch on the reins quieted her. Rand slung his bow across his back and climbed onto Red. Light. How could anyone's skin be so soft? Huron, where's the trail? Huron? Huron! The sniffer gave a start and left off staring at Celine. Yes, Lord Rand. The trail. South, my lord. Still south. Then let's ride. Rand gave an uneasy look at the gray-green bulk of the Grolm lying in the stream. It had been better believing they were the only living things in that world. Take the trail, Huron. Celine rode alongside Rand at first, talking of this and that, asking him questions and calling him Lord. Half a dozen times he started to tell her he was no lord, only a shepherd. And every time, looking at her, he could not get the words out. A lady like her would not talk the same way with a shepherd, he was sure, even one who had saved her life. You will be a great man when you found the Horn of Valere, she told him. A man for the legends. The man who sounds the horn will make his own legends. I don't want to sound it, and I don't want to be part of any legend. He did not know if she was wearing perfume, but there seemed to be a scent to her, something that filled his head with her. Spices, sharp and sweet, tickling his nose, making him swallow. Every man wants to be great. You could be the greatest man in all the ages. It sounded too close to what Moraine had said. The dragon reborn would certainly stand out through the ages. Not me, he said fervently. I'm just... He thought of her scorn if he told her now that he was only a shepherd after letting her believe he was a lord, and changed what he had been going to say. Just trying to find it. I had to help a friend. She was silent for a moment, then said, You've hurt your hand. It is nothing. He started to put his injured hand inside his coat. It throbbed from holding the reins, but she reached out and took it. He was so surprised he let her. And then there was nothing to do except either jerk away rudely or else let her unwrap the kerchief. Her touch felt cool and sure. His palm was angrily red and puffy, but the heron still stood out, plainly and clearly. She touched the brand with a finger, but made no comment on it, not even to ask how he had come by it. This could stiffen your hand if it's untended. I have an ointment that should help. From a pocket of her cloak, she produced a small stone vial, unstopped it, and began gently rubbing a white salve on the burn as they rode. The ointment felt cold at first, then seemed to melt away warmly into his flesh. And it worked as well as Nynaeve's ointments sometimes did. He stared in amazement as the redness faded, and the swelling went down under her stroking fingers. Some men, she said, not raising her eyes from his hand, choose to seek greatness, while others are forced to it. It is always better to choose than to be forced. A man who's forced is never completely his own master. He must dance on the strings of those who forced him. Rand pulled his hand free. The brand looked a week old or more, all but healed. What do you mean? He demanded. She smiled at him, and he felt ashamed of his outburst. Why, the horn, of course, she said calmly, putting away her salve. Her mare, stepping along beside Red, was tall enough that her eyes were only a little below Rand's. If you find the Horn of Valere, there will be no avoiding greatness. But will it be forced on you, or will you take it? That's the question. He flexed his hand. She sounded so much like Moraine. Are you Aes Sedai? Celine's eyebrows lifted. Her dark eyes glittered at him, but her voice was soft. Aes Sedai? I? No. I didn't mean to offend you. I'm sorry. Offend me? I am not offended, but I'm no Aes Sedai. Her lip curled in a sneer. Even that was beautiful. They cower in what they think is safety, when they could do so much. They serve when they could rule, let men fight wars when they could bring order to the world. No. Never call me Aes Sedai. She smiled and laid her hand on his arm to show she was not angry. Her touch made him swallow. But he was relieved when she let the mare drop back beside Loyal. Hurin bobbed his head at her like an old family retainer. Rand was relieved, but he missed her presence too. She was only 2 spans away. He twisted in his saddle to stare at her, riding by Loyal's side. The Ogier was bent half double in his saddle so he could talk with her, but that was not the same as being right there beside him, close enough for him to smell her heady scent, close enough to touch. He settled back angrily. It was not that he wanted to touch her exactly. He reminded himself that he loved Egwene. He felt guilty at the need for reminding. But she was beautiful, and she thought he was a lord, and she said he could be a great man. He argued sourly with himself inside his head. Moiraine says you can be great too, the dragon reborn. Selene is not Aes Sedai. That's right. She's a Carianan noblewoman, and you're a shepherd. She doesn't know that. How long do you let her believe a lie? It's only till we get out of this place. If we get out. If. On that note, his thoughts subsided to sullen silence. He tried to keep a watch on the country through which they rode. If Selene said there were more of those things, those Grolm, about, he believed her, and Hurin was too intent on smelling the trail to notice anything else. Loyal was too wrapped up in his talk with Selene to see anything until it bit him on the heel. But it was hard to watch. Turning his head too quickly made his eyes water. A hill or a stand of trees could seem a mile off when seen from one angle.
Alright, everyone, I'm gonna call into this live for tonight. Well, I want to thank everyone for stopping by, and everyone continue to stop by. Definitely appreciate all y'all support. Until next time. Excuse me. Y'all stay safe out there.